Hello and welcome to the latest episode in our Virtuositeam webinar series. My name is Colin Bullen and I am founder and director at Virtuositeam. In today's webinar, we're kicking off the new year with something quite exciting. Since we launched in 2019, our training has grown and developed and has been really well received by those that are engaged, but we've always been challenged by the limitations of short training engagements with customers, or the lack of follow through that you get when people do our online training. Towards the end of last year, we were introduced to a product called GWork. As far as I'm aware, it's the first online tool, one I've seen, that really makes habit creation possible in a business setting. It recognizes that business cultures are the sum of the behaviors that people engage in while at work, and creates a truly innovative framework for the adoption of behaviors that make business strategy real. Genius is that although the behaviors are all backed by research to deliver high performance outcomes, they're broken down into micro behaviors that require little or no training to adopt. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Oran Cohen. He's the genius behind GWork. Oran is a visionary executive with 18 years experience in driving business and digital transformations across high impact sectors such as finance, healthcare, and technology. He's worked with global leaders like Google, Barclays, ABSA, FMB, Nestle, Johnson & Johnson, World Health Organization, and has extensive background in organizational psychology and innovation and leadership. And this is evident in the robust approach to enhancing workplace performance and culture that he takes. Oran's a dynamic facilitator and strategist. He's known for his ability to decode and influence complex organizational dynamics and design high-performance cultures. Oran, a very good day to you. How are you doing? You want to start with a little introduction to yourself and tell us why you decided 3 years ago to put your heart and soul into developing GWork?
Hey, Colin, great to meet you. Wonderful to be here with you on the podcast today. Yeah, my name is Oran Cohen, and I'm the CEO and founder of GWork. G stands for genius. It's about unlocking the genius of people at work and the potential of organizations to achieve their business outcomes. So the way that I arrived at GWork was a journey where, through my experience in organizational psychology, leading innovation and change within organizations, I started to see a recurring pattern again and again. So I've worked with companies like Google, Nestle, Unilever, and as a consultant, and I noticed a gap between strategy and execution.
Yeah.
Let me do that again. Between strategy and execution. The reason is because this is very negative.
I would say you can do it again if you want.
Yeah, I'll do it again. And I started to notice a recurring gap between strategy and what leadership is trying to achieve, and execution, how it gets embedded and executed in everyday work. And organizations like banks and insurance companies started to ask me to assist them to execute strategic focuses on the ground with people. Mm-hmm. So my background is in psychology, and I have a master's in leading innovation and change. And I love systems thinking, the ability to see how things connect. And one of the realities is that in the way by which we run organizations, as we start to build them out, we actually start segmenting our thinking as well. Segmenting and seeing pieces are functionally separate from one another. And so I was brought into these organizations, and in order to create the change, what I would do with them is I would help them almost translate, you know, that lovely saying, do you speak well? Nobody speaks the same language. So the board and Exco is sitting and they're planning what they want to achieve. It's in a beautiful PowerPoint. And then you've got customer satisfaction data. You've got HR, you've got learning and development, performance management, and none of these things seem to meet on the ground in the context of behavior. And so what I used to do is I would go into these organizations and I would help them define a behavioral blueprint. Now, what is a behavioral blueprint? It is what the strategy looks like in day-to-day behaviors. Really that simple. And what we started to see was it united and integrated disparate functionalities in the business. It connected the macro with the micro. In other words, how leadership, what leadership needs versus how that gets translated on the ground. And then we use that to actually measure behavior through a unique 360 approach that quantifies the behavior, and then supported people to take action. And the results have been quite incredible. So we worked with a bank, and we saw customer satisfaction scores move from 32% to 93% in 6 months. And, you know, through common ways, right? Is because an individual wants to know, tell me what you want from me, but in a way that I can understand, right? Because if I say to you, Colin, I really think you need to be more innovative. Or you know how managers are, they say, Colin, I really need you to be more assertive. Mm-hmm. And the individual is listening to this, and I call it it's called the feedback sandwich, and it's got many other names that are not for media. But the reality is that we call that constructive feedback. Mm-hmm. But constructive feedback is the individual going, how? So that's how we reached GWork, and we decided to build a technology that allows you to do that at scale. Define the key behaviors that the business priorities require, measure that within each individual, create accountability, awareness, and data, and then support the individual through AI algorithms to actually practice behaviors, what we call deliberate practice. So taking it from, hey, in performance reviews, how well do you align to the values of the company? This individual is a 4 out of 5. What the heck does that mean? And so we help companies define that in a more granular way and help individuals understand how they can accelerate their performance. And in essence, GWork is a performance accelerator and a performance improvement tool.
It sounds to me, if you accept the mantra that culture is the sum of the behaviors practiced in an organization, that to some extent, GWork is then also helping the organization design its culture, because you're actually working at the heart of things, the behaviors that the employees practice day in, day out, aligning them to strategy, and that will bring your strategy and culture in line, which, yes, is going to drive performance. I mean, that's the key. I mean, is that the thing that we're talking about?
Absolutely. And one way to think about it is, if you look at behavior is culture. Behavior is skills. Behavior is performance. Behavior is engagement. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to look at, there's a famous diagram that shows a iceberg. And at the top, there's an area that you can see that is above the water. Yeah. And then there's this whole section below the water. Yeah. And individuals are often just trying to do something, to maneuver around or change something. And it's really hard. But that visible element is behavior. Yeah. It reveals everything about the organization. So how do you go about moving it? Is you look at what people do and how you can go about shifting the micro actions that they take in order to shift the behavior, to shift the culture, to shift the engagement, to shift the performance, etc. And
from what I understand, that's the beauty of it, because you talked about micro actions there, micro behaviors. These are not difficult things. These are not things that you're going to need a couple of hours in a classroom and some extensive online training or whatever to do. You're setting this up so that these behaviors are and structured according to level of existing competence, I would guess. They're behaviors that somebody can read on the system and go, oh yeah, I know what I've got to do that. That's obvious. Is it as simple as that?
Precisely, exactly. And the reality is what we did is we looked at the literature. We used common sense, we used psychology, and we looked at what behaviors achieve high performance organizations. We looked at the top high performing organizations around the world. We looked at academic papers, my own experience as a consultant leading teams in various organizations. And so what we did is we built a proprietary model that looks at a focus area, for example, ownership and accountability, and then defined specific behaviors that create ownership and accountability. An organization chooses what behaviors they want. And what we've done to each behavior, based on the feedback, you're allocated 1 or 2 behaviors after the organization chooses about 12 to 15. So the individual receives a recommendation on which behavior to focus on, and receives what we call habit recipes. Simple actions that, when repeated again and again, are guaranteed to improve the behavior. And if we improve the behavior, we achieve our strategy. We improve performance, business performance. It's so funny to me always that performance and business performance are disparate. They're seen as different things in an organization. And so performance is actually business performance that is fueled by individual performance and team performance.
Okay. Do you find that organizations understand well what those behaviors are that drive business strategy, or is part of what needs to be done, does that include helping them understand what behaviors would actually do that? Or is it more of a case of, we know what they should be doing, but we just can't get them to do it? What's the problem that you're typically encountering?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the reality is that we find it hard to, I mean, if we knew how to do this, we would do it more often, because it is a missing gap that exists in our thinking of how does my business strategy or how do my values translate into behaviors on the ground. And so what we do with organizations is we run a very simple process that takes them through a couple of steps. And within an hour and a half, we help them define the key areas of a specific project or a business unit that they're trying to move the needle on, and help them define that in a set of behaviors. We have a very simple methodology, and I can actually share it so that our viewers can practice this if they'd like. So the first question you ask yourself is, what are your top 3 most important goals as a business?
Sure.
And then you actually start to align those goals with critical outcomes. Once you're clear about the outcomes, you also explore what are the challenges in the way that people show up today to achieve that, and what specific behaviors individuals will need in order to achieve that outcome. Yeah. And then you link the behaviors and the outcomes together. Yeah. So that's a very, very simple methodology that we ran in a quick session to help the organization define that. Of course, we can deep dive and do diagnostics and that kind of thing. But we found that this has a clear impact, because what happens from that is then the 360 gets rolled out, which is a self-peer manager direct reports based on those observable behaviors. And instead of it being like an open-ended, oh, I think Colin's a really nice guy, but he needs to improve his assertiveness skills, it actually says, how often do you see this individual playing out this behavior, exhibiting this behavior? and you say, I observe it all the time, to I don't observe it at all on a Likert scale, and that quantifies the behavior. It gives a very clear number, and creates an organization-wide benchmark as well. So the individual is able to understand, am I above company average, below company average? What's my perception gap? How did I see myself versus how others see me? And so before you even start the process, you are rewarded with many insights about how you show up, and how you can grow. The other thing that we focus on is that we see the 360 at the beginning as a baseline. And what does that mean? It means it's a jumping off point. This is not a diagnostic tool to tell you who you are. It's a diagnostic tool to help you how to grow. It's a growth tool. It's an acceleration tool, right? Because 3 months after the initial baseline, the company and the individuals within it do another check-in around the behaviors that they're growing, and they get feedback on that. So what happens in between is they actually practice habits. They practice actions. They schedule them. So our system integrates directly into Google Calendar, into Outlook, and the individual is able to schedule specific actions into their calendar, and start practicing these simple actions and turn them into habits. And habits create output.
Okay. I love the concept of the deliberate practice. Just been reading Angela Duckworth's book on grit and how passion and perseverance deliver in the end, better outcomes, and deliberate practice is very much at the heart of that. Deliberate practice includes an element of coaching. So you're talking about, even though this is essentially it's an online system that you're using, you're able to give feedback in a way that's going to make sense to the individual, so they can be coached in the direction of travel. Is it as complex as that? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say a manager wants to give feedback to the individual. They can write the feedback, but then they link it to a behavior on our system.
Gotcha.
And the minute they do that, the individual will receive pre-written content from our library that says, why might I have received this feedback? What would it do for my career if I built this behavior? What would it do for the company? And how do I do it? What do people who do this well do? And then gives you simple habit hacks, habit recipes that you can start to practice. And you choose from a library and you say, okay, I'm going to take this behavior on, this action, this habit on for the next 3 to 6 weeks. And the system gamifies that journey and creates awareness on your streaks, and creates a leaderboard around action, and creates also peer coaching. So an individual can reach out to people who achieved really high levels on a specific behavior and get support from them if they so choose.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I've got a good idea of what it's all about. Hopefully the listeners have too. It seems to me that this is the timing of the launch of this, of getting this out to market, and the approach that you're talking about is great. The world seems to be going through a huge amount of change at the moment. There's some quite big political shifts certainly happening, and the world is sort of kind of reshaping itself in many ways. And many of those changes are influences that are buffeting organizations to some extent from the outside. So they're having to adapt and change to things that are happening around them. So with that, do you see what are the opportunities and threats for organizations as we go into 2025, and how might this approach help them?
That's a fantastic question. So there are 3 opportunities and 3 threats we need to keep top of mind. So first of all, 2025, without a doubt, if you have not heard this yet, is going to be the year of agents entering the workplace. If you have not heard what that means yet, basically agents are autonomous AI-driven capabilities or functionalities that can start to take repetitive work off the plate of staff currently. And organizations, the CEO of Slack went online and said, we are not hiring any more developers because in 2025, our developers are going to be AI agents. And our existing staff will be augmented and supported by these AI agents. So that's one thing that is an opportunity. And of course, we can talk about how it's a threat as well. The second is that hybrid and remote work is not going anywhere. The more this is playing out and the more we're able to access talent from different countries, the more remote and hybrid work makes a lot of sense. The difference, though, is the companies who get accountability and engagement right in those contexts will be the ones who win. And this is becoming more and more difficult because the bubble of the pandemic has very much burst, and the realities of how people show up is still playing out. The last one is what I believe is behavioral data. Organizations have employee data. So they know, for example, absenteeism. They know retention. They know performance information. And they know engagement data. But there's a critical element that's missing, a huge gap, which is behavioral data. And our vision is to create behavioral data for organizations to be able to transform their organizations. And we always say, and as you know, you can only manage what you measure. And so our vision is to bring behavioral data to the table. So I would say those are the three opportunities that are key to success for any people or business leader today.
I'm the actuary in the team, and it has been a frustration to me ever since I delved into the world of behavioral psychology, that when I go to find that behavioral data, the understanding of what's really being done in organizations, cultures, whatever it is, it's just not there. We've never had a means to measure behavior before. And therefore, when you're assessing process of change, we have had to create the tools to gather that information, to understand how and why and when people do actually change their behaviors, and then what the consequences of that are. It's a step in the change process, do something differently, then an outcome that you're interested in improves as a consequence of getting that behavior right. So that's, thank you. It's a huge step forward in the space. The AI story, we've known it's coming. The fact it's coming so soon, I think, still shocks me.
It boggles our mind, right?
Yeah, it's been something that's in front of mind for me. I've looked at the future of work for a while, but you always felt that it was next year. It was some way in the future, but yeah, the fact that it's here and now is it's going to create some interesting dynamics in the workplace, and the focus on the humanity of the workplace, who we are and why we're there, as opposed to a system-driven AI process type thinker, is probably going to be even more important. So designing culture using the process that you talk about, I imagine, is going to be
I think the technology will become more and more commoditized, and the unique competitive advantage is going to be culture. The way by which people communicate, work together in order to achieve the output is going to be more important than ever. I think there's one more thing that I wanted to share to make this tangible for our audience. And I wanted to give an example. So let's say you're trying to improve your profit margins. One of the key elements to achieve that is around ownership and accountability. So on GWork, you'd be able to select ownership and accountability, and then you'd select from a set of behaviors. For example, might be meeting deadlines and fulfilling commitments, or planning work to ensure deliverables are met, or taking accountability for the outcome, not just the individual tasks. And when those behaviors are optimized in your organization, you're going to be doing more with less. And GWork will then give the individual specific actions and habits that they can start practicing on a weekly or daily basis that actually start to improve those behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. That's for me the beauty of this. It's very practical. It results in people doing things differently as quickly as you can. And you say that all the PowerPoints, the words, the requests, the direction, the instruction, there's nothing quite like actually getting people to do something differently, and it being proven to be aligned to what you need to do, in this case, to generate profit. You've clearly studied systems thinking. You made a big thing about it in the introduction there, and it's obviously been a core part of the consulting work that you've done in the past. So why has that been important to you? What is it about that particular way of thinking has appealed to you, and how has that been baked into the way in which GWork functions?
That's a great question. So when I was introduced to systems thinking, it was like somebody gave me a language to a feeling and a way of looking at the world that I've always experienced. And at the core of systems thinking is to understand that everything is connected to each other. And when you see that, so instead of me seeing performance management over here and engagement over there, or customer satisfaction scores, or business strategy as sort of islands that are completely disconnected and disparate, it's important to almost widen our lens and hold more of the elements together and see how they ricochet between one another, how they grow and create one another. These are concepts. We've called something engagement. We've called something performance, but they're abstract. And one of the key things that I'm so excited about with behavior is that it is the most visible way to understand any organization. And so systems thinking allows us to connect the dots. And really, that's what we've done with GWork, is connect what strategy is to behaviors, connect personal growth to company growth. Look at what are the key elements that will move the needle for the organization day to day in operations, through integrating into tools like Google and Outlook.
Yeah, it's you're talking here about the fundamental interconnectedness of the things, and again, I use the word humanity. That we are complex as human beings. There's a lot going on for us, but making it simple, dumbing it down to the point at which you've got, this is a behavior that if the organization practices, in the majority of employees do this, we're actually certain to get what we want. It's not just a request, that will actually drive results. It will drive change. So it's a really simple thing, and people who have found it hard when they're talking about culture and culture as the sum of the behaviors that everybody practices, difficult to change culture. This is actually dumbing it down to the point at which it's actually very, very simple and delivers in a way that people will feel comfortable with. There's no, it's okay. It strikes me that GWork's got some good performance measurement aspects as well, because you will be asked to do things, you will be asked to perform in a certain way, and if you don't, it will become obvious that you're not or you're struggling. So there's a performance measurement element to what we're talking about.
It's such an interesting one, right? Because performance management, performance and assessment is a concept that's quite reductive. It's quite isolated in the system, right? Because I'm saying, well, how are you showing up? Well, we're saying, well, you're showing up through the daily actions that you take. And so instead of just assessing somebody and saying, this is the verdict, see it as a continuum where an individual can be assessed in order to grow. Now, theoretically, that's what happens in organizations. You know, the PDP, the recommendation on your learning plan, but let's face it, that's not how it works. Usually, because often the learning is an afterthought. The way that we have set it up is that the learning is why you get assessed. It's not that you get learning because you were assessed badly. And so because of that, we see GWork as a performance accelerator. It accelerates wherever you are as an individual, as a team, as an organization. It accelerates your capabilities and your performance.
Okay. So we are fundamentally a training organization. That's what Virtuositeam does. We offer training to help people develop workplace skills that are known to help performance improve. We do that by delivering online content, face-to-face training, and various other methods. But you're very clear that what you're doing here is not about training at all. It's about the adoption of micro habits. So I think you're telling the audience this, but just why are micro habits effective? It will sound like a secret weapon to success.
So that's an interesting one, you know. So I've also studied psychoanalysis for 12 years and have sat on 1 or 2 therapy couches in my life. I always joke and I say, oh, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds on for personal development, and my wife still thinks I'm obnoxious. And I say that to make us all realize how hard change is. And one of the things that I realized is that so often what happens is that we think we need to dissect the past to fix the future. And I think there's a place for that, for sure. But when we're trying to create change at scale, sustainably, one thing that I've realized is my greatest transformations came from what I started to do differently. When I started to, I know so much about health, but when I started to practice health, that's when things changed for me, and they continue to change for me. So I think the way to see it is that to understand that when we act, there's a whole bunch of things that happen psychologically. One is we affirm a new reality. We build esteem and a sense of success in taking action, not thinking about taking action. We demonstrate to ourselves what we want. So we experience it. Oh, so that's what it looks like to do it well. And so in a way, action becomes its own transformational tool to change. And so the more we do it, the more we change. And I think about James Clear's story in his book around that journey of the cycling team, who were not a winning team in any way, shape, or form. And when the new captain came into the team, he started to change things incrementally and consistently. One day he would embed a new habit around washing hands. Another, it would be about changing how they sleep. And every time he would add another layer. And so they started to experience more success because they were sleeping better, because they were sick less, etc. And what that did is that over time, it becomes compounding and exponential. And the result was that they turned from a team who wasn't delivering and performing at all to winning a gold medal.
Yep. And this is not instant overnight success. This is, I'm going to make a change, and it's going to shave 0.1 second off the time that we're going to do. That's not going to make us winners, but it's better than we were before. And then you make another change, and it does another 0.1 or 0.2 of a second, and suddenly you're competitive, and so on. And that build up of different ways of doing things, different behaviors, gets you to where you be, provided you've got that vision and direction of travel that you know. And what you're saying is, I've got a business strategy, I've got a business vision. That's where I'm going. That's what I'm orientating towards. I know the behaviors that are going to get me there. I've just got to get people one by one moving in that direction. Oran, I get the feeling we could go for another hour and still have
we could.
I don't think the audience is going to tolerate that, so I'm going to have to draw it to a close, and I'm very sorry about that. So thank you so much for joining this webinar and sharing your valuable insights and wisdom with our audience. I honestly believe that GWork's a game changer for companies, and they recognize the importance of behaviors and its alignment with business strategies. They're sure to be excited by and engaged by what we're saying here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
So for the audience, just to remind you, at Virtuositeam, we offer a range of online and face-to-face courses which help to build exceptional teams, all of which are accessible on virtuositeam.com. We now also offer GWork, so contact us at hello@virtuositeam.com to learn more about aligning behavior with business strategy or developing exceptional teams. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining us again. Keep an eye out for future webinars in the Virtuositeam series. And until then, goodbye.